The journey toward our higher selves continues with conversations in the Indigo Tent. Join us on the adventure.
Hey, Zella.
Hi, Wendy. Welcome to the tent.
Thanks. What's been going on in your world?
Well, I have been thinking about play. And I know that you, as a former ballroom dancer, I would assume that you and all the social dancing that you did, I would assume that that was a form of play for you.
Absolutely was, especially the social dancing. It just,
Yeah.
no two dances or pieces of music were ever the same.
So then you have to, you're lost in the adventure of figuring out how to dance to this tune.
Well, yeah, and connecting the non-choreography, but it's like, what move would work with this flow, and what move would work with this partner, and yeah, it became a kind of play.
I like that. Well, listeners, the reason why we're going to talk about play today is because I heard an interesting story a few weeks ago on The Pulse, which is an hour-long program on NPR. I think the host is Macon Kelly, something like that. But anyway, one of the junior journalists was analyzing her own life and realizing that it sounded like she was in her late 20s, early 30s, that she did not play, that she worked and she shopped online and she watched TV and she did nothing in the sense of how we view the word play. And so continuing to listen to this story, this young woman did some research about play and why it's important for human development. And she found a psychologist, psychiatrist, probably a psychologist, right, Wendy? She found a psychologist who had done a lot of research about play, and in particular, he examined the life of one of our early mass shooters. So that's always a tragic event in our history.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but one of our first mass shootings was back in the 60s, which is hard to believe that things that type of nonsense has been going on for a while. But I believe the man's name was Charles something. Back in 1966 at the University of Texas at Austin, he climbed up in the one of the bell towers and then just randomly shot innocent people. So this psychologist was interested. Why did he do that? And apparently there was no warning. There was no red flags. This guy was quiet, reserved, kept to himself. And I think he was a maintenance man on the campus. So when the psychologist went back and looked into the man's childhood, he interviewing other people, he found out that this as a little boy, he was not allowed to play. His father thought that play was a waste of time. And so he either had to be reading a book, doing chores, or helping his father do something, but was never allowed to play. So any thoughts on that, Wendy?
Ooh, wow, that's a can of worms.
Yeah.
In a way. There's just a lot to process there. Because then it makes me think about the years in which we had so much child labor, right? And then did those kids ever get to play? And then it's like, what does that do, generation after generation, where you have children who are forced to either, to not play, or to have to work, or to not be kids, whatever that means. And then it's like, what does that do to them as adults?
Right. And how does that affect them in the brain development aspect?
Yes. And then how they interact in their adult lives, and all that pain and trauma gets trapped in their bodies, and then it gets released violently in this case. And so it's Interesting because, I can't help think about, every species, at least all the ones I've come across, whether they're human or animal or whatever, have some form of play as children. And that
So
play
true.
is to,
I'm going to step back inside. We thought it would be fun to do the podcast, one of us outside playing, but I think it's breaking up a bit. So I'm going to go back inside.
well, it was fun playing out there while it lasted, right?
Yeah. So go ahead.
And yeah, and you had a gorgeous backyard to look at and enjoy, and scenes of nature. And and pretty good weather, I would think, huh?
Yes, it's beautiful here this week.
Yeah, this week or this moment, because in Texas, if you don't like the weather, wait a few minutes, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Well, except in the summer, then you got to wait a few months. But yeah, so this idea of play, I keep thinking, it's like every animal, it seems like they play with their animal siblings, or they do some form of play, because that helps them learn the skills or survival skills, if you will, that they might need as adults.
Yeah. And Wendy and I both have boys, men now, of course, but I don't know about yours. I would assume, Wendy, that yours were like mine. Yeah. My boys were constantly wrestling, and sometimes it was fun, and sometimes it was, please stop. But at one point I began to realize, when I compared them to families that had girls, and the girls were always, politely playing, and my boys were rambunctiously playing, I realized the wrestling was a need to actually physically touch another human being, because they're, typically not going to be affectionate like girls are. I would see some of my friends' daughters, they would sit in the chair together and hold hands and have their dolls on their laps and read a book. And not my boys. No, of course not. They were wrestling on the floor like, wild animals.
And mine were, we did a lot of throwing of things. And
Yes, throwing.
Hours and hours and hours of throwing balls back and forth. And I actually, during those years, developed a halfway decent football spiral pass.
Nice. I love it.
But it didn't go that many yards, but I could get it to spiral.
My dad would be proud of you. The football coach dad would be proud. So play. So Wendy and I both taught in public schools for a number of years. And for my career, I noticed the children that I first started out working with, they had such amazing developmental skills by the time they got to me. The first grade I taught was third grade in Burleson, Texas. And those kids were amazing. And then I moved up to fifth grade and taught in Mansfield, and those kids were amazing. And then the world changed. Video games really took over. Mm-hmm. And I noticed, and my colleagues noticed, and I'm sure you noticed, Wendy, that over the years, kids have become less and less academically ready. And we see more and more emotionally disturbed kids. And you have to wonder if it's not all these violent video games, and is that messing with their brain development, and more importantly, are they getting outside and playing that very important skill, imagination, that researchers have shown time and time again is vitally necessary for brain development. So if you're watching a video game, I would tell my students, it's like the birds feeding their little chicks. The mama bird goes and gets the worm, and she chews up the worm, and then she spits it as she swallows some of it and then she regurgitates it back up into her mouth, and now it's all digested, and then she feeds it to the baby birds. That's what you're doing when you're watching a video game. You're using somebody else's imagination, and so you're not getting the full benefit.
What an interesting visualization.
Yeah, and I use that on purpose because if you can gross kids out, that you can get them engaged.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
And along with that, now I spent a lot of years in the university level too, and over the years teaching fitness activities, teaching social dance, where it was movement oriented classes.
Yep.
And I noticed from my perspective that earlier on, you do a dance, whatever, and they had more stamina and more, it seemed like more general body awareness or muscle
Oh,
awareness.
that's interesting.
And then, fast forward, here I am in I was at the time, I was in my 40s, and I was, like, hey, let's do this dance, this, that, we'd be doing our movement. And these kids couldn't keep up with me. And I'm twice their age. And I was like, wow, this is alarming.
Very. Yeah. So we're not only limiting ourselves emotionally, mentally, but also physically if we don't get out and play.
Right.
Now, one thing I've noticed about my dear friend Wendy is she takes a walk almost every day, and you have a bike, right? That's actually a powered bike. And I've noticed that after I talk to you, Wendy, that I mean, if we have a conversation after you've taken a walk or ridden the bike, you're in a very playful mood. And
Yeah,
so
kind of euphoric.
I've noticed some people, they go on their walk because, well, I have to go on a walk because I have to get my heart rate up, rah, 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 and it's more regimented. And so how do you see exercise?
Well, I see it two different ways. One is there's the discipline of it, the thing you got to do because you got to do it, because you got to feel better, because you got to be fit, because you got to da 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 da. But then, and then it's almost like the shaming side of being fit, right?
That's what I'm getting at.
5 miles,
Yeah.
well, you're not really exercising.
Right.
Or if you're not, working out in the gym, then you're not really being fit. And it was like, wait a minute, something's wrong with this picture. And I noticed even just this morning, like I was starting to feel a little bit of mental clutter going on. End of semester, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, grades.
And I realized, well, and then I went on a walk, and I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to clear my head. I put on a little moving meditation music and just looked around at like all the different animals and birds, and just let my mind wander where it wanted to wander. I wasn't worried about the pace, how, or how far I was going, or how long I was going, or how fast I was going. And it was just like, yeah, it was cooler weather here too. That helps. And it just sort of invigorates me. And then I was like, yeah, life is good. Look at all the good stuff. And for me, it's this time also when I can just think about all the things that I truly am grateful for. I mean, just as simple as I actually can go out for a walk. I actually physically and emotionally and it's like I'm in a safe place. So I can walk. I'm physically capable of walking, and just like that whole piece, and just allowing my brain to think about all the good things that have happened just completely turned my day around.
So you were able to clear out mental or emotional clutter.
Yeah, or redirect it. Yeah. And so I think that's an important part of play too, is that it just allows us to practice being different.
Uh-huh. And I wonder, going back to what made this whole conversation happen, this young woman admitting that she doesn't play. I wonder how many adults don't play, but they think they do. For instance, my mother's favorite sport is shopping. Now, I hate shopping. I mean, I do it, and my mother loves clothes shopping. My mother could go shopping. In fact, she used to. When she had a car, when she was allowed to have the keys to the car, she went and shopped every day of her life. And I think back on you hear stories from your parents of what they did as children. My mother and her mother,
You
my
mean
grandmother.
not the story about walking 3 miles to school every day and back?
Yeah, not those stories. So my mother and grandmother would go horseback riding once a week. My
Mm.
mother never took me to do that. Obviously, my grandmother knew that this was a way to connect with her daughter. It was a way to play. It was a way to get out in nature. It was a way to interact with an animal. She knew that it would be good for the development of her daughter. Um, Somewhere along the line, my mother, you know, changed. Let's just say there was lots of events in her life that caused her to become bitter and difficult to deal with. And um, but shopping is not play, in my opinion. Maybe it is to some people, but it's personally, I think that sounds materialistic
Oh,
and shallow.
well, we could
So
call it hunting for the
hunting,
field.
maybe that's it. Maybe I just have a jaded perspective. So for my husband and I, we go for a hike once a week, and to us that's play because we're exploring different parks in this new part of town that we've moved into, and the new part of the metroplex rather. So, and most of the parks here in Arlington have some type of a nature trail, so for us it's an adventure, and that brings in the play aspect.
Right. It is an adventure, and it occurs to me we have different, not you and I, but I mean, like, in society, there's a variety of opinions or preconceptions or misconceptions about what play is, right? Because we think of,
Exactly.
stop playing, or that idea that you know idle hands are the devil's workshop, or it's like, if you're not busy every moment of the day, then you're going to fall into sin and
Yeah,
temptation,
right,
whatever
and
that
you will be
is.
a worthless human being.
Yes, and so we've kind of equated play with being idle,
Mhm.
or
Or frivolous.
or frivolous, or
Mhm.
uh, not serious, or whatever the right words are. But it's like there's that negative connotation that play means you're not being productive.
And then, okay, let's break this down. Is that almost a male female thing? Because what
I
comes to
think it's,
mind is
I think it's
men playing
cultural.
golf. Okay, this is grown men that go out and chase a ball with a stick. But I golfed with my father, and I can tell you it's exceedingly fun. It truly is. So have men found a way
Especially with
to,
the ball.
justify it and saying they're cutting business deals? But my father, when he retired, he played golf every day. There was no business deals to be had. It was the pure enjoyment of play and interacting with other people, which, there's the imagination side, playing all by yourself, but there's also the interaction side of play, team sports, and all of those things.
Hmm. Yeah, so we really want to, like, I don't know, rethink perhaps what our own definition of play is,
Hmm.
because is play doing something, and I'm just asking here, is play equated with doing something organized like a team sport, or is play connecting with others on a activity? You think of, like, in traditional societies, the kids would play with their bows and arrows and
Hmm.
practice being grown-ups, I guess, or um, they would play different hopscotch games, or games that gave them better coordination skills, or games that would challenge their mind.
Mm-hmm.
in thinking. So like
Well, remember when you would come to my school and teach dance during various units, and you would show the dances that the adults did, but you've also talked about the play that the children did
Mhm.
through dance.
Yes, and you know, a lot of our earlier dances were about daily life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the dances encoded our culture. Are you kidding me?
It's okay.
That would be my son calling, of course.
And you never have your phone on,
Never.
I know. Oh well, we can laugh and play at, and we can laugh at ourselves. This isn't play right now, but laughing at yourself.
It's like it's yes, technology interrupts and supports. You're right. So it's like yes. So dancing was I think I was saying dancing was part of encoding our culture from
Yes, that's
generation
what
to generation and helping us practice the skills that we would need or may need later on, or teaching us a skill. Like there's so many dances about like there's one that comes to mind in the Polynesian culture where um, there's a bark of a tree and they peel off the bark of the tree and they pound it down for I don't know days at a time and go through a whole process to turn that bark into almost like a cloth, and then they
hmm
patch those cloths together and make a huge um, um, well, all kinds of different things with it, but and then they'll draw different pictures on it and stuff, and it's a skill that is hardly done anymore. But there used, you know, there was a whole song with hand movements and everything about that process. And
hmm
so that was a way of, you know, it was play, but yet it was also reminding us of a skill.
hmm
And
I
when
like
we
that.
don't, yeah, so when we don't do that, how do we learn to be adults?
hmm
Well, how do we, and this was, sorry, I'm going to go off on a roll here, but this
Go for
was
it.
something always I found frustrating, uh, not frustrating, but challenging with students. Is like, oh no, you know, I don't do that. Or I can't dance, or I got two left feet, or I got this, or I got that. Oh, I want to, no, I don't want to learn that. You know, I don't want to dance because, you know, I'm not good. And I'm like, well, how are you ever going to get good unless you actually practice, which means play, right? So if
Yes.
we look at you know, if we look at learning a skill as playing, then how much different is that skill going to be for us?
Indeed.
Hmm.
Mhm. I think that's one of the many reasons why I like yoga. I feel like when I roll out my mat and I start moving, even if it's teaching, I have this sense of play. It's an adventure. What are we going to do? How am I going to get everybody from point A to point B, where we come into shavasana and we're totally relaxed and we're feeling alive, like the line from Dr. Frankenstein, he's alive, or it's alive. But you after you've done some movement, your muscles literally feel alive and your brain feels less cluttered, or you have been able to compartmentalize your thoughts and tuck them away neatly and get on with your day. The other thing that's fascinating to me, and I can recall this, it's such a sweet memory. My grandson, who's now 13, Jacob, when he was a little boy, the imagination that he had was off the charts. And I knew this as a teacher. When I would observe him play, when I would play with him, the 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 role playing he did with his stuffed animals, going outside and digging in the dirt, and he had a construction site on the side of their house. He took me over to the side one time and he showed me this incredible landscape that was in his brain. There was
Wow.
nothing there. It was dirt and rocks and some grass. It was the side of the house that we neglect, right? But he had a complete construction site going in his mind, and he described in great details all the things that were going on in this area. And I can tell you now for a fact, and it's not because I'm his grandmother, he is off the charts smart. So, what does that tell you? Imagination develops the brain. It just does. And our children need to play. They
It's
need to
how
get
we learn.
outside and dig in the dirt. Oh, and one comparison I have is earlier when Wendy and I were talking about doing this podcast, I said, well, golf is play. And Wendy said, really? I don't think so. And I said, well, okay, look at it like this, Wendy. It's grown men, yeah, going outside, chasing a ball with a stick. But if a grown man went outside and sat in a sandbox every day and played for an hour, we would think he was a weirdo. So our play evolves as we mature, as it should, right?
Hmm? Yeah, it changes because the imagination process changes.
Exactly.
And yeah, there is some level of I guess it's like it's a different type of play because with like golf, right? There's a lot of analyzation of, okay,
Mm-hmm.
where do I want the ball to go? How far do I need to hit it? What angle, direction, da 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 da. So there's like a lot going on in the brain. And then you're
Right. And
outside getting air. Woo!
exactly. Yeah, you're visualizing the shot. Well, that's imagination.
Yes, it is. And that's another whole thing of like imagination, is that just that thing that little kids do, because they're still figuring out what's real, what's not real in their own minds. And that's part of their development. And is that supposed to stop? Do we then, or when we get older, do we call it creativity? What? And why do we, what is reality and what is imagination anyway?
Mm-hmm.
But only our perspective.
Exactly. Exactly. So, moments with our higher self. What's on the agenda for our listeners?
Well, today's moment with your higher self is about figuring out what is your play. What does
Yeah.
play can or need to look like for you?
Or do you even play?
Or can you turn something that is mundane into play?
Mm-hmm.
Can you allow yourself to play?
Mm-hmm. Good questions. Cooking can be play because it's if you're trying something new and it could be an adventure. Now, when it's the drudgery of cooking, that's not play.
No, yes, it's the everyday. Oh, what do I do now? Yeah, versus I I enjoy cooking like themed or holiday meals because it's like a production. It's
Uh-huh.
it's gearing up for that performance,
Yeah.
and hopefully it all turns out well. Um,
And then speaking of holiday, we want to encourage you listeners to take time to play and to not let the holiday, the upcoming Christmas holiday or Hanukkah or whatever you celebrate, to not let that revolve solely around the food and the meal.
and the stress.
Yeah. So get outside and play. Take
Yeah,
some time to play.
I actually think it's like the greatest gift you can give to yourself and to your loved ones is time.
Mm-hmm.
Quality time with them. The
With with
presents don't last, or
right,
yeah, presents are presents. But
right.
being the present or being present
Be,
yourself
being present, yes.
is the
Playing a
greatest gift.
is the gift, yes. And playing a board game, developing that relationship. That's another thing that I knew as a young educator. The research was out that kids who ended up in or adults who end up in prison, when they go back and they look at their childhood, they didn't play games. They didn't play board games, especially. They didn't learn to follow the rules. They didn't learn the courtesy of giving another person the space to take the time to play their turn. So play games with your children. It's really important. Candyland. Does it get any better? Is that what it was called? With the ladders or Chutes and Ladders? There was that too.
It was always a fun one.
Yeah. Our favorite game right now is Farkle. 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 That's a fun game. It's a dice game. Makes you think, but you have fun with it.
Awesome. Yes. So give the best gift this holiday season and take time to play. After, of course, you define what play means for you.
Yes. And be present in that present to your family or your loved ones or your friends. Be present in their lives.
Right. It's like put a price tag on your gifts. Let's say, like growing up, we did silly gifts a lot with my siblings. It's like we all like chocolate. So, we'd get a giant Toblerone bar and send to my older brother, or he'd get like some coconut carvings. I mean, it was just like funny, silly stuff. So it's like change the price tag on your gifts so that you can play more.
There you go. I like it.
Yes. So play is important.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast and our musings about play. We especially hope it's caused you to define play and look for areas in your life where you play or where you need to add some playtime. Add some playtime. Just like your mother used to schedule playtime or play date with somebody. Schedule that for yourselves.
Yeah. Or just don't schedule and be random about it.
There you go. That's true. Yeah. Love it. All right, listeners, thank you. And leave a comment. Let us know. What is your play? What does it look like?
Yes, please share with us. All right. Have a great day.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to us, and always find ways to connect with your higher self.
Absolutely.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. We hope you've been uplifted by this episode. Please help us uplift others by sharing, subscribing, and reviewing our show. Join in on the conversation by adding your insights and transformations in the comments section. See you next time.